Well, I guess not everything tastes like chicken. Greetings and welcome once again to Roman of the Empire. I am your host, Roman. Today we are talking about The Last of Us Episode 8, When We Are in Need. As you may recall, last week, I was not fond of what I considered to be another waste of an episode with a minute in the beginning and a minute on the end. The minute on the end being Ellie sewing up Joel's wound that he got when they confronted the men at the college in Colorado. There were 4 men. They got in a kerfuffle. There was a bat that got broke. Joel had broken one of the guy's necks, but the bat segment ended up in his gut. So Ellie was sewing him up at the end of the episode in a not very sterile, and there's no way this would have actually worked kind of scenario. That's fine. This episode picks up right there. And this was I really enjoyed this episode. I thought the writing was fantastic. It's a simple episode. It's not incredibly complicated, but you do get, if you'll recall back in episodes 4 and 5, Kathleen, we called her the discount governor, who is the leader of the Kansas City resistance. And she was not a well-written character. She was a sociopath or psychopath, just a very flat. And you didn't like her, but you didn't like her for a lot of the reasons not intended by the way the show had written her. The character of David, who we meet in this episode, is a great villain. You don't like him, and you know why you don't like him. But he's written in a way that he has a lot more nuance. He's not just a flat character. There are a lot of layers to him, and by the end of the episode, you understand what he has done and what he is capable of doing, and you really don't like this character, and it's great. This is the villain you want, and again. We are in a community called Silver Lake Resort. That's what they call it. And this is the kind of the evil opposite of Jackson, Wyoming, which is a thriving community. This is not. This is a community on the edge of starvation that's having to resort to some pretty non-wholesome things. So one community... Also, it's in Wyoming. That's not like, a temperate zone. They get winters. They get bad winters up there. But this is in Colorado, and they're suffering from a harsh winter, and they're not thriving. It's like I said, it's complete opposite of Jackson. So you get the two versions here. And also, this is I would say more of a culty kind of thing, but it's kind of along those lines. But anyway. It's a good episode. They gave us another good episode. We're now 8 into it. I was a little bit worried last week. I'm like, I've only got 2 more to go. Then they threw episode 7 at me, which did not make me even want to watch the show. But episode 8 was good. And again, though, this is just a little bit of a spoiler before I go into the review. There are no signs really of the infected in this. This is an entirely human-driven episode. But, the humans are on a one-to-one level more compelling villain threat than the infected are. The infected, you know what you're getting with the infected. I mean, it is what it is. With the humans, it's a much more deep thing. So, I'm going to dive into the episode now, but this was a good episode, and I definitely... So, I would wait till if you haven't started the show, I don't know why you're watching this, but I would probably watch this all as a single thing as opposed to having to endure it bit by bit, because it's uneven. You get good episodes and bad episodes. This was a good episode, so there we are. Now we're going to dive into this thing. We start off. There's a sermon being held by a man named David. And he's reading from the Bible. It's kind of typical stuff. There's a girl who's crying. Her father has been killed, and David's trying to offer some comfort. And it is what it is. And she wants to know when they're going to bury him. And he's like, well, we can't bury him yet. The ground's too cold, so we'll have to bury him in the spring. Okay. Sermon ends. David starts talking to a man named James. And James is trying to convey to David the tone of the town. It's been a harsh winter and no one's doing great. And David kind of asked James, how his faith is doing. And he's like, look, I know, it's just this last 6 months have been hard. So David's like, well, I've heard there's some deer out there. Let's go hunting. So now we're back with Ellie and Joel, and we don't see Ellie and Joel together a lot in this episode. They're off on. Ellie has her own thing going on in this episode. So Joel's still out. Obviously, the wound that she sewed up is infected. Not surprising. She's trying to make him drink water, but he's unresponsive. So she's taking matters into her own hands now. She goes out with the rifle, spots a rabbit. It doesn't go well. The rabbit scurries off. She trips and falls on her face. What I do want to say is what I liked about the way this is shot. You really get a sense of how cold it is. If you've been in cold environments, you'll know what I'm talking about. As you can tell, Ellie's been out there for a little bit. You see the redness in her face and her nose. If you're out in the cold, that happens. So you get a very realistic sense of the environment. Then she hears a noise. It's a deer. She takes a shot. Doesn't kill it, at least immediately. And it runs off, leaving a blood trail. And she follows that trail. Now, who gets the deer first? It's David and James. And they're like, any signs of the hunter? They're like, well, I guess not. Let's take it. And then Ellie's like, no. So she's holding them at gunpoint, tells them to drop their weapons and to leave. And then David starts explaining, they're part of a larger community. Everybody's starving, women and children and such. And then he starts to deal. And he's like, look, we have things to offer, things we can trade. And I was like, do you have medicine? Do you have medicine? So they cut a deal. Half the deer for some medicine, but Ellie's going to keep David hostage while James goes back and gets the medicine. And this is a good exchange because David tells James exactly what to do. And James is looking at him like, are you out of your mind? And David's like, I'm not speaking in code. Go get the medicine. So there's no underlying thing in what he's trying to accomplish here. He wants James to go get the medicine. Okay. Now they're having David and Ellie are having a bit of a conversation. She's unloading the guns that are on the ground. He's like, so whose rifle is that? Is that your father's? Are you traveling alone, pumping for information? And Ellie's just not answering. Now, David points to a house. He's like, we may want to take shelter. I can build a fire. And Ellie's like, okay, fine. But you're dragging the deer over there. Cool. And now they're sitting around the fire, and this is where things go. This is, let's say, go south, but this is the writing I was talking about. The layers in this conversation alone are very, very interesting. It's a great scene. And again, this isn't a complicated episode. It's pretty basic. He tells her, he was a teacher before. All of us. Ellie asks him if it's cult, and he laughs, saying, "Well, I am a preacher, so And he started in Pittsburgh, and with his the flock, and they started traveling. But then the raiders would come, and they'd have to travel further, and they finally settled here, and they gathered people as they went along. And she says, "Well, I guess your luck had to run out sometime." And he conveys to her, well, everything happens for a reason. For instance, I sent 4 men to the town across the way not long ago. Only 3 of them returned. One of them was killed by a crazy man traveling with a young girl. Uh-oh. So the jig is kind of up here. Ellie knows, he knows. And now James is back, and he's standing behind Ellie with a gun. And David tells him to lower it. And again, James does not want to do what David is telling him. He's like, give her the medicine, and we'll call this. So he tosses the medicine to Ellie. Ellie runs off with the medicine, and leaving the deer, of course, because now she's compromised. James is irritated with David at this point. Because he's like, what are you doing, man? And it's interesting, the dynamic between these 2 men. David is in charge, very, very clearly. But James isn't a dummy. He kind of sees what this situation represents, yet he goes along. I mean, that's just the nature of these kind of relationships, I suppose. So Ellie rushes back to the basement where they're hiding. She doesn't know what to do with the penicillin. It doesn't like it comes with instructions. So she gets a dose. We don't know how accurate this is, and she doesn't know where to inject it. So she injects it directly into the wound site. And I'm like, oh my God. You have to suspend your disbelief a lot for the episodes in this, for the events of this episode to work. Many unbelievable things happen here. Well, I mean, Joel, by all rights, should be dead anyway from his wound and the way Ellie sewed him up. Again, it's not her fault, but none of this was done well. So now we're her injecting penicillin directly into the wound. And then she lays down, they get some rest, but we're back at the village. And they're preparing a meal. They have a big kitchen there. It was a resort before they took it over. They're preparing a meal. A man comes in with a tray of meat, and someone asks what it is, and he's like, "Oh, it's venison." This is the moment. This is the moment you realize that's probably not venison. So the meal is getting served up, and everyone's getting ready to eat. But then David and James come back. They've drugged the deer behind them, and David's like, "It's a big one," and everybody's kind of looking at him. He's like, rumors. You've got the rumors. You've heard that we may have found the people who are responsible for the death of, whatever the fellow's name was of their party who Joel killed. Well, the daughter says that they should kill both Ellie and Joel. And David walks up, takes off his gloves very calmly, and then strikes her so hard she falls out of the chair, then offers her a hand and says, you're not without a father, but you have to respect him when he's speaking. And this is where you get that cult vibe that we were talking about. So he sits down, and he has what is visibly a larger portion of food than everyone else. And then they say a prayer, and then they all start scarfing it down because they're starving. It was a creepy scene. I really enjoyed it. It was, like I said, the writing in this one is it's good. Because in that room, you get a sense of who's in charge. There's a clear hierarchy. But you don't really, his relationship with the flock. He's the leader. And you don't know how skeevy it is, but you do get indications that he's not just the guy in charge. It's a deeper connection than that. So we're back with Ellie and Joel. His wound is getting better. It doesn't look as bad. So she's going out to feed the horse. And in the previous scene, David does say, we're going to go out, we're going to find them, and we're going to dispense justice. Whatever that means in this world of scavengers. And, these are not... Remember, Joel and his party had to make bad decisions to survive. I would say this is similar. It's a complicated world where a lot of bad things just have happened and continue to happen, and people make these choices. We come to realize some things about David, though, and we'll get to that in a second. So, David and James and now a larger party are out looking for Ellie and Joel. Ellie scampers down to the basement, puts a knife on top of Joel, tries to wake him up, and his eyes open, but he's clearly not with it. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna distract him and buy us some time. So she barricades the entryway to the basement, gets on the horse, rides, shooting at the men as she's leaving. So she gets their attention. And now, and then you get another interesting scene between David and James before this happens, saying, why let the girl live? She's just going to be another mouth to feed. Maybe her dying is God's will. And David stops and just looks at James, and it's one of those looks that a parent might have to a child who has misbehaved. And James just looks at the ground, ashamed at what he's done, and it's really good. So anyway, Ellie's shooting, riding off, but James tracks her where she's going to be heading. Basically, he knows, and puts a bullet in the horse. The horse goes down. Ellie gets knocked out. The men surround Ellie, and despite the order that they've been given to take her alive, they're going to kill her. So now David, in the background, puts a bullet in the air as a warning and saying, really? So he scoops up Ellie, tells two of the men to drag the horse back to the town, and tells the rest of them, fine, go door to door and take your vengeance. Okay. Wow. Now, so the men are going door to door. And one of the men finds his way down into the basement where Joel is. You look and he sees the bloody mattress. Joel's not in it anymore. So he's looking around, trying to clear the basement, not doing a great job because Joel gets the drop at him, shoves a knife in his throat, and then they're laying on the floor together. Joel's clearly in pain while the man just bleeds out. Remember I said you have to suspend your disbelief because there's no way Joel should be capable of this action. Physically, he shouldn't be able to do it, but he does it, okay? So, because the plot must go on and, it is what it is. Now, back in the town, Ellie is now in a cage, and it looks like a kitchen. And she's coming to, and, why am I in a cage? Let me out. And David's like, because I'm afraid of you. You're clearly a dangerous individual. And he's trying to relate to her. And this is another very interesting scene. The whole her imprisonment, because this is where you understand what David is. Basically, he's telling Ellie that she's alone. Everybody else wants to kill you, but I can protect you. And he leaves, and then Ellie's kind of huddled against the wall trying to pull her thoughts together. It's the whole kitchen environment as a prison thing is disturbing for a lot of reasons. Now back with Joel, he's subdued the other two guys. They're tied up. He's beating the crap out of one, trying to get information. Where's Ellie? Where's Ellie? The guy doesn't want to talk, so Joel shoves a knife right into his knee. And it's effective. He says she's been taken to the town. He breaks out a map. He's like, you point to it, and your buddy better point to the same thing. So he shows him where they are and where the town is. And then Joel shoves a knife in his gut. And he goes over to his friend. His friend's like, whoa. I'll cooperate. And he's like, it's all right. I believed him. And he proceeds to beat him to death with a big pipe. Wow. Joel, we know he's a violent man because he's had to be, but you really see it come to fruition here. Also, again, he shouldn't be in the shape he is to do these things, but that's okay. Now, back at the lake, Ellie's looking around trying to figure out how to get out of the cell. And she looks across the way and she sees little bits of people on the floor. It looks like an ear and a finger. And David's coming in. He's got some food, and he's going to feed her. And she's like, "You're cannibals." He's like, "Well, we've had to resort to some things." He's trying to convince her that, but to be fair, this is actually just deer meat. Okay, that's fine. He didn't want to do this. He's ashamed over, the things that they had to do. She kicks the food away. She's not going to eat it. He says only a few members of the group know what's going on as far as the cannibalism goes. But he would have told her eventually. And now he's trying to draw basically parallels between he and Ellie, saying, they're both violent people. If he let her go right now, she would take her knife and she would kill him. And that he, before the outbreak, was a violent man. And he goes on this whole thing about the cordyceps, that it's not evil, that it's loving, that it multiplies, feeds, protects its children. Weird. He's a weird dude. And that he's this village's sheep, and he's looking for someone, a partner, to share the responsibilities, the things they could build together. Remember, she's just a kid, but he's speaking to her not on that level. And he approaches the bars, puts his hand on the gate, and says, I can tell them not to harm him, to let him go. And she's like, really? And so she puts her hand on the gate as well, and he's going to put his hand over her hand, at which point she grabs his hand, breaks his finger, tries to grab the keys to get out, and he slams her into the bars several times. Now she's bloody, he's got a broken finger, and then she finally tells her name. She can tell him Ellie. It was Ellie who broke your effing finger. And he's like, fine. He said, because she had made a joke earlier, about getting chopped into little bits. And he's like, yeah, little bits. He goes. So it's, it is what it is. So now Joel has tracked back to the village. It wasn't hard to follow the bloody trail of the horse. And he makes it, he finally, all the way to the end of the blood trail, there's a building that has a lock on it. He breaks it off. He goes in, he finds the horse, as well as some decapitated bodies that have been left in there. They've been gutted, and now, that's the meat. Ew. It's they don't go into overly gruesome detail with it, but you definitely get the impact of what you are seeing. And this, but we know they are cannibals now. Even they don't all know that they're cannibals, though. It was a good episode. Like I said, I really enjoyed this. And yes, it's gruesome, but it made for entertaining television. So now, and Joel finds Ellie's backpack, so he knows that she's there. Now, James and David come back to the room. They pull Ellie out of the cage roughly. Ellie bites David very hard on the hand, breaking the skin. So they're about to chop her up. They've threw her on the butcher's table, and she says, I'm infected, and so are you now, pointing to his bite. And he's like, they're like, bullshit. And they pull up her sleeve, and they see her in, the infected area. And there's a back and forth between James and David about whether she's actually infected. During this time, Ellie grabs the cleaver and hacks James in the neck. It's just real quick. And then scampers off. James falls out, bleeding out. And now there's the final scene in this hall. And I don't know how close this area is to where the people are, because you don't see other people during this. And this is one of those things that I found kind of wonky with the episode. Now, if they're doing the butchering of the people and they want it to be more secure, they're doing it away from where the people normally are. So I guess that would make sense. So it's like a lodge kind of thing. And Ellie's hiding. David, I'm sorry, is pursuing her through this lodge. It's trying to talk her up in all these things. She pulls it's called a log. It's a big stick out of the fire that's very hot. And he comes around a corner. She throws it at him, misses, but it catches the curtains on fire, and this spreads very rapidly. And David, instead of wanting to take care of the immediate threat, which is the fire, he is so focused on getting Ellie that he just lets it burn. And she secures a knife from, it's a kitchen area, so there's things around. So she gets a knife, and then he starts talking all creepy again about wanting to be more of a parent to her, to teach her. And you're getting real skeevy vibes off the dude here. And she ends up stabbing him in the stomach. At which point his cleaver that he's carrying falls. And then he starts just kicking the crap out of her, though. And he has her pinned. And you know what's going to happen. And this is what he explains. He's like, don't you get it? The fight is the part I enjoy the most. So this tells you, really, when he said he was a violent man before, we didn't really quite understand. Now I think we do understand the kind of man he was before. He's an evil, evil dude. Well, while he is getting ready to do this horrible thing, she grabs the cleaver. He's not good at focusing. And she hacks the shit out of him. And she just keeps hacking. It's you can see her horror, her rage at what has transpired. And then she goes outside, covered in blood, and a hand goes on her shoulder. She's panicked and shocked. It's Joel. And he sees her, and he hugs her, and he's patting her, and he's like, it's going to be all right, baby girl. It's going to be all right, baby girl. Hearkening back to Sarah, his daughter. And then they walk off, and that's the episode. Again, humans are the worst thing. Because, like I said, the cordyceps, the infected, you understand them. You know what their intent is. Humans, not so much. I like the juxtaposition between this community and Jackson. It's very stark, and it's the good and the bad of humanity. And again, Jackson is an anomaly. Most communities are going to be a version of the thing we saw in this episode, the bad. I liked the villain a lot. I liked the way the villain was written. Like I said, you really didn't like him, but he wasn't a two-dimensional character like Kathleen from Kansas City. So this was good. I actually thought this might end up being a two-parter, but they did wrap it up. And we talked about this a little bit on our big show reviewing multiple episodes with the Vex Electronica Joker voice, that a video game is not necessarily great for episodic television because you only get these little stories, because that's the way video games are presented in pieces. So this could have easily been a few episodes, but they wrote it based, from the game, so it's an episode. You're just getting those chunks. And it was still a very good episode. I liked it a lot. And that's it, And we got one more left in the big finale, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully that's good. Though season 2 is going to be sketchy, and we already know that because of they're basing it on the game part 2, which did not receive very good reception, unfortunately. So we know we're getting into a kind of a mess, pardon me, when season 2 comes around. But anyway, that's it. Please comment. I'd like to hear what you guys thought about this one as well. Like I said, it redeemed from episode 7. So let's hopefully episode 9 will hold up, and I think it probably will. For now, this has been Roman of the Empire, signing off. Please like and subscribe, as the channel does need it. Be kind.